Filipinos just set a new world record. Even Canada's leaders are reacting. The world didn't see this one coming. Not the U.S., not Japan, and definitely not Canada. But here we are again, breaking records while everyone else is still busy doubting us. Filipinos just pulled off something so big that even Canada's prime ministers are reacting. Yeah, the country known for maple syrup, politeness, and healthcare just paused because the Philippines did what most nations only plan to do. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments, and I will give you a heart. Let's be honest for a second, Filipinos breaking another world record shouldn't be surprising anymore. We've been doing it quietly for years, breaking records in work hours, resilience, and how much heart a person can carry before it breaks. But this time, it's not about karaoke, beauty pageants, or basketball half-court shots. No, this one hit the world's economic radar, and even Canada's leaders are scrambling to understand how a nation they once labeled developing just became their most critical workforce lifeline. See, Canadians are polite, but even politeness can't hide panic. The reality is brutal. Canada's aging faster than it can replace itself. The country's birth rate? The lowest it's ever been, barely 1.3 per woman. One of the lowest in the entire Western Hemisphere. And here's the kicker. By 2030, over 9 million Canadians will be over the age of 65. That's nearly 1 out of every 4 citizens. Hospitals are already overwhelmed, farms are struggling to find workers, and the construction industry is begging for manpower. Enter the Filipino workforce. Now, this isn't new. Canada's been recruiting Filipinos for decades. But what happened this year made the headlines. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration confirmed that in 2025, over 1.2 million Filipinos are now working in Canada, an all-time high. That's nearly the population of Ottawa itself. And here's what blew everyone's minds. According to Canada's Department of Labor, Filipinos make up over 60% of all active foreign caregivers and more than 35% of newly issued work permits under the health and hospitality sectors. That's not a statistic, that's a revolution. The very backbone of Canada's labor system now beats with a Filipino pulse. From hospitals to highway projects, from universities to nursing homes, the Philippines is literally keeping Canada running. But here's the deeper truth no one wants to say out loud. Canada didn't just invite Filipinos, it needed them, badly. The country's immigration policy shifted gears this year, expanding the temporary foreign worker program like never before. Why? Because Canadians, kind, educated, comfortable Canadians don't want to do the hard jobs anymore. So who steps in? The people the world underestimates most: Filipinos. We show up, we work, we build, we heal, and we do it all without asking for applause. Let's get real. This is the irony of modern history. The colonized nation is now the one propping up the colonizer's economy. The helper has become the hero. The background characters have quietly taken over the main story. Canada's Prime Minister himself, in a 2025 press conference, admitted the Canadian healthcare system would not function without Filipino nurses. That's not exaggeration, that's confession. And it's not just nursing. Filipinos are now dominating sectors once seen as Canadian only. Engineering, IT, caregiving, culinary arts, logistics, we've infiltrated every corner of the map. One study by Stats Canada revealed that Filipino workers contribute an estimated $12.6 billion CAD annually to Canada's GDP. Let that sink in, $12 billion. And most of that money goes right back to supporting both nations, through remittances, home and taxes abroad. But here's the uncomfortable truth. While Canada celebrates our resilience, it's also quietly dependent. That's what makes this record different. This isn't about bragging rights, it's about survival. Canada's entire labor infrastructure is being held together by a nation thousands of miles away. A nation that many in the West still label poor. And that's what's got policymakers sweating. Because here's the thing. Filipinos don't just work harder, we work smarter and longer. We fill gaps others can't. We bring empathy to efficiency, humanity to healthcare, spirit to systems. And now, the cracks in Canada's economy are forcing them to admit what they've always known but never said out loud: the Philippines is irreplaceable. But let's be brutally honest, it shouldn't take a labor shortage for the world to see our worth. Filipinos have been saving other countries for decades. Nurses in the UK, seafarers in Greece, tech workers in Dubai. And yet, when we ask for fair pay and equal respect, the global system suddenly has amnesia. Canada's praising us now because they have no choice. Because when a country that prides itself on order starts falling apart, it always turns to the people built from chaos. You want irony? Filipinos are holding up the very systems that once looked down on them. Canada's leaders are realizing what Japan, the U.S., and the Middle East already know: you can replace machinery, but you can't replace Filipinos. And the best part? We're not doing it out of revenge or pride. We're doing it because that's who we are. Our greatness doesn't shout. It shows up in the quiet in hospital corridors, in farm fields, in classrooms, in kitchens. It's not loud. It's loud enough to be felt. But here's where it gets interesting. Canada isn't just hiring us. They're now learning from us. Provinces like Alberta and Ontario have started studying the Filipino workforce model, how our sense of family, faith, and community increases productivity and morale. Imagine that the world's wealthiest nations now studying our values. And yet, while Canada applauds us, the Philippines still struggles to create enough opportunities at home. That's the bitter twist, isn't it? We set a new world record for excellence abroad, while many of our own still struggle to find stable work at home. But maybe, just maybe, this global recognition could finally shift something. Maybe the world realizing our worth will force our own government to do the same. So yeah, even Canada's leaders are reacting not with pity, but with respect. They're finally seeing what we've always known, that the Filipino spirit isn't built to follow, it's built to lead. And this is just the beginning, because in part 2, we'll talk about why Canada can't survive the next decade without Filipinos, and how this quiet workforce revolution could reshape global migration forever. If you're watching this right now and you've ever said, "I wish they'd respect us more," go type "Proud Pinoy" in the comments. Because this time, the world isn't giving us charity, it's giving us credit. You know what's funny? When countries start depending on you, they never announce it with fireworks. They whisper it through policy changes. They hide it behind headlines like "Canada expands worker program" or "Government partners with foreign nurses." Translation? We can't survive without Filipinos, but let's not say it out loud. Because here's what's really going on. Canada's polite, but its economy is bleeding out in silence. The baby boomers are retiring, hospitals are overwhelmed, and schools are losing teachers faster than they can hire them. So when they realized the entire system was seconds away from collapse, they didn't panic, they called the Philippines. According to Statistics Canada, over 90% of the new healthcare recruits in 2024 came from the Philippines. That's not just a number, that's a lifeline. In Ontario alone, Filipino nurses filled nearly 70% of rural hospital shortages, saving communities that were weeks away from closure. Imagine that small towns in Canada surviving because of people from halfway across the world who left their own families to care for someone else's grandparents. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Canadians are starting to realize that importing kindness has a price. The Filipino work ethic isn't something you can mass produce. You can't code empathy. You can't automate compassion. You can't outsource heart. And that's exactly what they've been trying to do, replicate what we have naturally. Meanwhile, Canada's parliament just passed a motion to fast-track the Philippines-Canada Labor Mobility Agreement, making it easier for Filipinos to migrate, settle, and even bring families. On paper, it's a win-win. But read between the lines, it's also an admission. An admission that the world's 10th largest economy can't sustain itself without a developing nation's workforce. And while Canada calls it partnership, the truth is, it's dependency disguised as diplomacy. Let's look at the numbers. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business warned that labor shortages cost them $38 billion in lost productivity last year. And guess what? Every time that number spikes, so does recruitment in Manila. They don't just want workers, they want Filipinos. They've learned the hard way that skill is replaceable, but character isn't. You can teach someone to weld, but you can't teach them to care while doing it. Now, you'd think Canada would be celebrating this, giving awards, raising flags, renaming hospitals after Filipino heroes. Nope, the recognition's still muted. Why? Because admitting your survival depends on someone else is uncomfortable, especially when that someone else comes from the country you once viewed as third world. But that's exactly why this record is shaking the system, because this time, the narrative flipped. Filipinos aren't coming to Canada to ask for opportunity, they're coming to supply it. That's power. Quiet power. And let's not forget, we didn't rise because someone gave us a chance. We rose because we refused to stop showing up. It's the single mom in Calgary working 3 jobs but still sending money home to build her mother's house. It's the nurse in Nova Scotia learning French just to comfort her patients better. It's the Filipino construction team that finishes projects 2 months early, not for the bonus, but because that's what they promised. You see, Canada's realizing something profound. Filipinos don't just fill vacancies, they fill voids. Emotional, social, even cultural ones. In a country where loneliness is now classified as a public health issue, Filipinos are bringing warmth back into the equation. That's not labor migration, that's soul migration. But here's where I'll hit you with the irony. While we're winning abroad, we're still bleeding talent at home. Every Filipino who leaves to support their family abroad is also a symptom of what's missing in the Philippines: opportunity, trust, and systems that work. Canada may be thanking us now, but deep down, it should also make us ask, why can't our own country offer us what we give to others? Still, in this moment, let's not downplay it. We've set a world record, not just in numbers, but in impact. For the first time, Canada's social infrastructure officially depends on another nation's people. Not tech, not trade people. And that nation is us. And while politicians debate policies, Filipino workers are quietly rewriting Canada's story in hospitals, in classrooms, in every snow-covered street where someone whispers, "I don't know what we'd do without them." That sentence right there, that's the real record. Even the Toronto Star published a feature titled "The Heartbeat of Canada Has a Filipino Accent." And no, that's not just poetic journalism, that's the truth bleeding through politeness. Canada's economy might be cold, but its backbone now speaks Tagalog, Bisaya, and Ilocano. But this is where it gets even more interesting, because the next decade won't be about dependency. It'll be about influence. When enough Filipinos become the very system they sustain, they'll start shaping the policies, not just serving them. It's already happening. Filipino-Canadian leaders like Rechi Valdez, Canada's first Filipina federal cabinet minister, are proving that our impact doesn't stop at the factory floor or the hospital ward. It's moving into parliament. And you can bet Canada's watching closely, because when a group that was once seen as workers starts becoming decision makers, it changes everything. Respect stops being optional. It becomes policy. So yes, even Canada's leaders are reacting not just because of what we do, but because of what we represent. Proof that no country can call itself developed if it still depends on the undervalued. Proof that Filipino strength isn't borrowed, it's built in. And in part 3, we'll talk about what this means for the Philippines, how this global recognition could become the spark that turns a nation of workers into a nation of world builders. If you believe it's time the world stopped calling us helpers and started calling us partners, type respect in the comments right now. Because what's happening isn't just history, it's justice. Let's stop pretending this is just about jobs. What Filipinos are doing in Canada right now in hospitals, schools, and skyscrapers is much bigger than employment. It's evolution. Quiet, relentless, history-making evolution. For decades, the world called us migrants. Today, they're calling us essential. And tomorrow, they'll be calling us leaders. Because that's what happens when the people who built someone else's nation finally start building their own legacy in the process. Here's the brutal truth no one says out loud. Canada didn't just open its doors to us out of kindness. They opened them out of need. But what they didn't expect was that we'd walk in and start changing the architecture. The Filipino presence in Canada isn't just filling gaps, it's reshaping systems. In healthcare, education, agriculture, and technology, Filipinos are setting new benchmarks that even locals are following. This isn't a workforce anymore, it's a wave. Take this in. As of mid-2025, Canada's Ministry of Immigration reported that over 957,000 permanent residents traced their roots back to the Philippines. That's nearly 3% of Canada's total population. Think about that, a community so powerful it could form an entire province. We're not just visitors anymore, we're voters, entrepreneurs, mayors, policy shapers, and it's making the system blink twice. Now let's talk about that world record, the one Canada's quietly applauding. The Filipino community in Canada just became the largest and most economically active Asian diaspora per capita in the country's history. That's not about headcount, that's about impact. According to Canada's Labour Market Insights 2025, Filipino-led small businesses generated over $6.3 billion CAD in revenue last year alone. That's nearly double the figure from 2018. In cities like Toronto, Winnipeg, and Calgary, Filipino-run enterprises are no longer ethnic stores. They're economic engines. But here's where the world gets it wrong. They think our success abroad is proof we've made it. It's not. It's proof that we had to leave to be seen. It's the quiet heartbreak behind every success story. The OFW nurse who holds a stranger's hand in the ICU while missing her child's first steps. The engineer in Edmonton who builds highways for a country he'll never retire in. The teacher in Vancouver who shapes other people's children while her own grows up on a video call. This is what greatness looks like when it costs too much and we've paid it in full. Still, the world can't deny what's happening. Canada's Prime Minister himself said during a 2025 economic address, Filipinos represent the very best of what international cooperation can achieve. Their work ethic is unmatched, their values indispensable. Translation, we can't replace them and we shouldn't even try. That's not flattery, that's fact. Because the Filipino brand of excellence is built differently. It's not powered by privilege, it's powered by pressure. And here's the beauty of it, we're no longer waiting for validation. The Filipino diaspora is starting to understand its collective power. When nearly 1 million Filipinos decide to vote, invest, or even speak as one, policies shift. Markets move, attitudes change. That's the beginning of sovereignty, not the political kind, but the personal kind. The kind that says, you need us, and now you'll treat us like it. Canada's leaders are beginning to realize that the Philippines isn't just a source of workers, it's a source of wisdom. Filipino immigrants have one of the highest rates of employment to education alignment in the entire immigrant population. That means we don't just take any job, we take the job, master it, and improve it. We're not placeholders, we're system upgrades. But let's not romanticize this too much. There's a darker layer because even as Filipinos rise, inequality shadows the story. Many of our kababayans still face exploitation, unfair contracts, and long hours with no rest. They're praised in speeches but forgotten in policy. They're seen as essential but treated as expendable. That's the hypocrisy Canada will have to confront because admiration means nothing without action. Respect isn't words, it's wages, rights, and representation. And this is where the new generation steps in. The sons and daughters of OFWs who refuse to be just statistics. They're growing up Canadian, yes, but they're also growing up Filipino. They speak both languages, English and empathy. And they're entering politics, business, and media with something Canada desperately needs: perspective. The kind that comes from watching your parents build a life from scratch and still smile every Sunday call home. This is the next world record, not how many Filipinos Canada hires, but how many Filipinos it elevates. Because the truth is, we didn't come to blend in, we came to stand out. We came to prove that dignity doesn't need borders, and greatness doesn't need permission. So, when Canada's leaders react with awe, they're not just reacting to a statistic, they're reacting to a shift in global balance. The same way South Korea did when they realized their factories ran smoother with Filipino engineers. The same way Japan did when their hospitals filled with Filipino nurses. The same way the world is doing now, realizing that the Philippines isn't just sending people abroad, it's sending solutions. This is our era, and Canada just happens to be the stage. The world record isn't about numbers, it's about narrative. The Filipino narrative, the one that started with service but ends with sovereignty. Because let's face it, when the world needed heart, Filipinos showed up. When the world needed strength, Filipinos delivered. And now that the world needs direction, guess who's quietly taking the wheel? So to every Filipino watching this, whether you're in Toronto, Manila, or somewhere in between, remember this: you're not a worker, you're a world builder. You're not an export, you're an example. And you're not just part of history, you are history. Type vision in the comments if you believe this is the decade where Filipinos stop waiting for recognition and start writing the rules. Because this right here, right now, is our proof that the Filipino dream was never small, it was just global.